Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. I met a survivor. This is a story about someone I met on a random day in a random place around 2008 or 2009. Being Jewish. I was brought up learning about the Holocaust. We studied what the Nazis tried to do and learned of the sheer, terrifying nightmare of what innocent Jews and others went through. Ultimately, millions being put to death for simply being who they were. The story behind this encounter haunts me to this day, and it will continue to haunt me for the rest of my life. However, I consider myself lucky to have met this woman and heard what she had to say. Life can be unmercifully cruel. The story this woman told me is on a whole other level of cruel. Hearing it quickly put my petty life problems in perspective. We really have no concept of how vastly one's life can be torn apart in an instant. There is no guarantee that what you have and who you have today will be here tomorrow. Live for today. Love yourself. Love others. Love your life and be grateful for those you hold dear to your heart. If you are like me and you cry when things affect you deeply, you may want to get a tissue. A few times a week, I would go get coffee or a smoothie and walk down to the beach where I lived to enjoy the morning, or sometimes late afternoon and stay to watch the sunset. I often went there in order to relax and take a break from life. It's simply breathtaking. It's a remarkable place, and no matter what is going on in life, I am always able to quiet my mind there. I grew up in the area, and even though I've moved far away, it will always have a permanent place in my heart. Over the years, I've met many interesting and colorful people from all walks of life there. This day, I met someone whose story shook me so deeply to the core. I still tear up when I think about it. I arrived at the beach and sat on one of the concrete benches on the cliff overlooking the ocean and surfers far below. A pleasantly perfect day in Southern California with scattered clouds and sunshine. I usually sit watching the ocean and the surfers in the water as I sip my drink and sort my thoughts. I noticed a much older woman, rather frail looking and probably into her 90s, sitting on the next bench. She had a coffee cup in her hands and an empty cup was sitting on the bench next to her. The empty cup kept blowing over with the wind, and she would frantically pick it up and place it back on the bench next to her. I found this a bit odd since there was a trash can less than 10 feet away. At one point, it blew my direction, so I reached down to pick it up for her just as she reached for it too. I could not have imagined what would happen next. As she reached for the cup, I noticed she had faint numbers tattooed on her left forearm. My heart sank in my throat. I immediately knew what they were. This is where the Nazis would tattoo a serial number on Jews at the Auschwitz concentration camp to keep track of them. She had been categorized and inventoried just for existing. My eyes began to water behind my sunglasses. She noticed that I noticed the tattoo and made eye contact. She said, "Thank you," referring to my reaching for the cup. I took off my sunglasses and replied with a very sincere and emotional "Shalom," with a teary-eyed look to convey that I know. She lit up with a warm smile, pleasantly surprised, and asked if I was Jewish. I said yes, and we struck up a conversation. She was in town visiting San Diego with family. We talked about what a beautiful place this is and some other small talk that I honestly don't remember. After a little while, she asked if I would like to know about the tattoo. I said, "If you would like to share, I would be humbled and honored to listen." She began to tell me about being in the Holocaust and having been separated from her husband when they were abducted by the Nazis. She said he was her soulmate and they both truly believed they were meant for each other. They met when they were both 10 years old, married at 18 and taken prisoner by the Nazis just 3 years later. In 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, the Nazis broke into their home and forced them outside. She and her husband were barely dressed and barefoot when they were forced out into the street. She explained that she and her husband were separated immediately. She said the last memory she has of her husband is being held back by Nazi soldiers while watching him dragged away by other Nazi soldiers. The last thing she heard him say was, "Be strong, my love." She was then taken to a concentration camp. "Forgive me. I don't recall which concentration camp she said she was taken to first, but she spent a few years there. Then, later on, she was taken to Auschwitz where she remained until it was liberated in 1945. She was a prisoner for 6 years simply because she was born Jewish. She managed to survive a living nightmare all that time. She explained that since she was young and strong, she was spared because she could do manual labor. Some of that manual labor involved being forced to move bodies of the executed and cleaning up areas so they were ready for more executions. She had no choice. If she wanted to live, she had to do it. I can't imagine the depths of horror she experienced. She didn't go into too much more detail about what she must have endured, and I didn't pry for anything other than what she offered to share. After the war ended, she searched for her husband for more than 2 years. Sadly, she eventually learned that he had been one of the 6 million plus murdered. At this point, I'm just a mess of tears. I'm no longer the person I was a few minutes ago after hearing her story, and she wasn't done telling it yet. She produced a tissue from out of nowhere and offered it to me. I don't know about you, but just about every grandmother I've ever met has this magic ability. She continued telling me her husband always loved coffee and it was a great passion of his. He had dreams of opening a cafe specializing in gourmet coffee and pastries where they lived in Poland. Keep that tissue with you for this next part. Perhaps the whole box. She went on to tell me how they would often sit together, drink coffee and talk, with the passion and excitement of a child on the first night of Hanukkah. He would explain the specifics of where the beans came from, the climate, how it was brewed, and the subtle tastes and aromas. She said his passion about life is what captured her heart so long ago. Since they were early teenagers, on his birthday every year, it became a tradition to go to a park near where they lived, sit on a bench, drink a special brew he prepared, talk and spend time with each other. She said they both looked forward to it all year. The empty cup that kept blowing over was for him. That day was his birthday. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.